Hello and welcome back to Forest Folklore. We are at chapter 6, which is actually Trees Continued, and we are at Mythical Trees. I'm visiting someone's house today. Not exactly a forest, but we are surrounded by trees, just as nice. So here we go. In the early strivings of the mind of primitive man to account for the scheme of creation, the tree took a foremost place, and the sky with its clouds and luminaries became likened to an enormous cosmogonic tree of which the fruits were the sun, moon, and stars. Many races of the earth evolved their own conception of a world tree, vast as the world itself. They looked upon this tree as the cradle of their being, and it bore different names among different nations and possessed different attributes. Among the Scandinavian nations, the world tree was known as the Ash Yggdrasil. This tree, which typified existence, was believed to have sprung from the central primordial abyss and to have had 3 roots, one for the past, one for the present, and one for the future. One root was situated in Niflheim, beside the well or fountain called Hvergelmir. The second was placed near the well or fountain of Mimir in Jotunheim. I'm going to show you those words. And the third grew beside the well or fountain of Verd or Urdor, which is in heaven, and was the spot where the gods were wont to hold their meetings. 3 main branches sprang upwards, the center one of which supported the earth, and piercing it in the midst, issued from the mountain called Asgard, the home of the gods. The branches of this central stem overshadowed the entire universe. Their leaves were the clouds, and the flowers and fruits which they bore were the stars. A second branch sprang up by the fountain Urdar, and a third by the fountain Mimir. The fountain of Urdor, the water of which was supremely holy, was guarded by the 3 Norns or Fates, named respectively Verd, Verhandi, and Skuld, who represent the past, the present, and the future. I'm going to show you their names too. These daily water the roots of the tree with water drawn from the fountain in order to sustain and invigorate the tree. In this fountain swim 2 swans, symbolizing the sun and the moon. From the tree falls a clear honey-like dew called Hunangsfall, which is the food of bees. The 4 winds are symbolized by 4 hearts running to and fro among the branches, and they are forever biting at the topmost shoots. And that's hearts as in Harts. An eagle sits in stately majesty on the topmost bough, with a keen-eyed hawk named Viorfolnir perched on his head between his eyes, and who gives him advice. The eagle symbolizes the atmosphere, and the hawk symbolizes the external ether. A monstrous serpent or worm of the abyss called Nidhoegar lies coiled at the foot of the tree in the fountain of Hvergelmir, and it, along with other snakes, continually gnaws at the roots. These serpents represent the internal fires, as ever anxious to overwhelm the earth. A squirrel named Ratatask, symbolizing rain and snow, constantly runs up and down the main stem, never endeavoring to sow enmity between the eagle and Nidhoegar. A wise man or giant named Mimir dwells in the fountain called by his name, and as the waters of that fountain from which all streams had their source are full of wisdom, he, from quaffing these, is the wisest of all. Here also, in Jotunheim, dwell the frost giants, or Hrimthers. Under the tree is hidden the horn called Gjallar, which is to be sounded by Heimdallr, the warder of the gods, in order to rouse gods and men for the last great conflict, known as the twilight or doom of the gods, in which time life and the world are all to pass away. In the Edda, known as the Voluspa, or Lay of Walla, the prophetess, we read, "The sons of Mimir tremble, the tree in the middle takes fire. At the startling sounds of the noisy horn, Heimdall, horn in air, loudly sounds the alarm. Odin consults the head of Mimir, then the ash raised from Yggdrasil. That old tree shivers, and Jotun breaks his chains. The shades shudder upon the roads to the lower region, until the ardor of Surtur has consumed the tree." The poem, however, concludes by telling how the world will be renewed, and how the tree will spring up again in all its green beauty and grandeur, and how the gods will once more congregate and deliberate on Ida field beneath its shade. The earth will then be repeopled by a new race of men whose parents had been carefully hidden in Hod Mimir's grove, that is, the world ash itself, during the dread conflict. Their names were Lif, life, and Lifthrasir, desire of life, and they were nourished on the morning dew. The Volsunga Saga is an early Teutonic epic which relates how, on one occasion, Odin, in the guise of a stranger, thrust a great sword Gram into the trunk of the old Branstock, saying, "Whoso plucketh out this sword shall have the same in gift from me, and will find that better brand he never bare." There the sword remained until in the world war between light and darkness, Sigmund succeeded in drawing it out. The world tree of the Germanic races bore the name of Irminsul, and it, like Yggdrasil, reared its lofty head far into the other. The name Irminsul, however, would appear to refer solely to the trunk of the tree, and to mean the columns of the universe which support and uphold all. 3 or 4 great highways branched out from the foot of Irminsul towards the 4 great cardinal points, resembling the roots of Yggdrasil. Professor de Gubernatus quotes the definition of it given by Rudolf de Fold, thus, Truncium cuoque ligni non parve, magnitudinis in altum erectum subdivo collabant, patria iam linguia Irminsul appellantas, quad Latin diciter universalis columna quasi sustenens omnia. I shall show you that passage. Later on, statues of the gods appear to have been erected on wooden pillars, and these likewise bore the name of Irminsul. In support of the grim quotes from an ancient writer, upon an Irminsul stood an idol huge, him they called their merchant. And again, on an Irminsul he climbed, the land folk to him all bowed, meaning that the individual was worshipped as a god, and probably the ancient Teutons worshipped a god bearing the name of Irmin, but who he was is unknown. Grimm suggests that probably Rudolf de Fold associated with his Truncus ligni the thought of a choice and hollowed tree stem rather than of a pillar hewn into shape by the hand of man, and says that as the image melts into the notion of tree, so does the tree pass into that of image. A similar wooden pillar is found figuring in the mythology of ancient Egypt. Each town or village of that land of mystery worshipped its own particular divinity, and these divinities manifested themselves in the form of some object in which they were supposed to dwell. One of these was the god of the town of Dadu, who was Osiris, and who manifested himself in the form of a wooden pillar, which thus became identified with him. Originally, it was simply the trunk of a tree deprived of its leaves. Adolf Erman describes a festival, a representation of which he found in a Tibetan tomb. This was the feast of the erection of the pillar dead. The pharaoh began the festivities by offering a sacrifice to Osiris, the Lord of Eternity, who was represented as a mummified figure wearing on his head the pillar dead, and dead, by the way, is spelled D-E-D. A wooden pillar lying on the ground was then raised by the pharaoh, assisted by his relatives and a priest, to an erect position, and this was symbolic of the moment when the dead, D-E-A-D, Osiris, came to life, and his backbone in after ages represented by the dead, D-E-D, again stood erect. Later on, this pillar became symbolic of the four pillars supporting the heavens. In the royal tombs are often found objects resembling miniature pillars or poles bearing four horizontal bars across the top and colored green, red, and blue. These little figures, known as the dead, D-E-D symbol, were hung around the neck of the deceased so as to ensure to the royal occupant a safe passage to the netherworld and also to endow him with life and strength. This sacred emblem of Osiris of Dedu was afterwards used in architecture, and charming effects were produced. Dead, D-E-D, and Irminsul seem to have been of the same type of Asherah. The Omahas of North America had a sacred pole, which seems to have typified the cosmic tree, and was known as the Mystery Tree. It was the center of the four winds and the home of the thunder bird. Grimm tells of a mythical tree known as the Drudenbaum, or tree under which wizards were said to meet. He says, a somewhat doubtful legend tells of a world-old Drudenbaum on the top of the Harburg near Plankstellen in Franconia, that its leaves from time to time shed golden drops, milk oozed out of its roots, and under it lay a treasure guarded by a dragon. On the tree sat a great black bird who clashed his wings together and raised a storm whenever anyone tried to lift that treasure. The conception of the universe held by the ancient Egyptians was that of an enormous box or chest, of which the lid formed the sky. As the lid required support, they imagined it to be upheld at each of the four corners by a forked tree. Anticipating the danger that these trees would be blown over by some storm, the imagination of a later period replaced them by four lofty mountains, which were connected by a chain of lesser peaks. The cosmogonic or world tree of Hindustan is the symbol of vegetation, of generation, and of universal life, and consequently of immortality. It bears various appellations and is in itself considered to be actually the god Brahma, an elementary form of Brahma being known as the tree of Skamba. All the other gods of the Hindu religious system were considered to be branches from this divine tree, which branches overshadowed the universe. In Hem 81 of the 10th book of the Rig Veda, the question is asked, what was the forest? What was the tree from which the sky and the earth issued? The answer being that the forest, the cosmic tree, was the god Brahma himself. The sacred Vedas describe this cosmogonic tree under different names. As the Akvata, or Papala, it is said to be visited by two birds of heavenly beauty known as kapodas, and similar to doves. These come in turn, one merely hovering over the tree without eating and singing rapturously the while. This one symbolizes day, or the sun. The other, symbolizing night, or the moon, comes to feed on the fruit. When this tree is in danger, all the universe is threatened with extinction. This appears to be the same tree which is described in the ornithology of Aldrovandi as follows. There is a tree in India called Paradoxion, whose fruit is sweet and useful, so that doves also delight to tarry in it. And the serpent fears this tree, so that he avoids the shadow of it. For if the shadow of the tree go towards the east, the serpent flies towards the west. And if the shadow of the tree reach towards the west, the serpent flies toward the east. And the serpent cannot hurt the doves because of the virtue of the tree. But if any of them straggle from the tree, the serpent, by its breath, attracts it and devours it. Yet when they fly or go together, neither the serpent nor the sparhawk can or dares hurt them. Therefore, the leaves or bark of the tree, suffumigated, avert all evil that is of venomous beasts. Under the name of Kalpavriksha, this tree produced the fruit which nourished the first men. But according to the Agama Sutra, a tree named Polo was the first tree to be created after the sun and the moon, and it was intended to supply the want of nourishment on the earth as mankind had eaten all the savory and sweet crust. Bearing the name of Paragata, the Hindu world tree was recognized as one of the 5 trees of the Hindu paradise. As Ilpa, it grows in Brahma's own world and is placed in the center of Lake Ara. Beyond the Vagara Nadi, that ever-juvenescent river which produces the waters giving eternal youth, the tree likewise gives eternal youth, and to it Brahma gives his own perfume. And from it he took the vital sap. To the branches of this tree the dead cling, and by their aid only are they enabled to climb up to and to enter into the regions of immortality. Under the name of Kalpadruma, this tree fulfills all desires, gives knowledge, wisdom, and inconceivable bliss. It is a cloud tree growing on a high mountain and surrounded by brilliant flowers and musical streams. It was on this mountain that, as the legend tells, Tathagata, while doing penance, sacrificed himself by giving up his body to a starving tiger. Day and night were produced by the shadows of the tree before the sun and the moon were created. Among all the benefits which mankind was able to obtain from it, that of knowledge was most sought after by Buddha and his followers. Another name under which the tree is known is Soma or Amrita, and from its branches flows the life-giving ambrosia, the essence of immortality. It was believed to grow in the 3rd heaven, over which its mighty branches stretched, and under it the gods reclined, quaffing the immortalizing juice. 2 lovely birds, as in the case of Papala, sit on its topmost boughs, while other birds are occupied in pressing out the ambrosia. From this tree the gods made the heavens and the earth, and it bears all kinds of flowers and fruits now known on earth. This great cosmogonic tree has also been known as the tree of beautiful leaves, and under it the first father of men is said to have evoked the ancestors, i.e. the gods. The Vedas themselves are said to have been the leaves of this tree. Several other mythical trees of the sky are described in the Hindu cosmogony. We find one called the Kushtha, which is mentioned in the Atharva Veda thus: where the Akvatha stands, in the home of the gods, the 3rd heaven from here, there the gods approach the Kushtha, revealer of the ambrosia. The legend relates how the gods set forth in a golden boat to recover the lost ambrosia, and how the boat was lit up by the tree Kushtha. From this it would appear that by the Kushtha is meant the moon, because it adds that the Kushtha grew the moment that the golden boat descended on the summit of the mountain Himavant. Besides these above names, the great cosmogonic and generator tree has borne the appellations of the tree of the sky, the solar tree, the lunar tree, and the tree of the clouds. The milk, the water, the dew, and the rain which flowed from them was the ambrosia, that divine fluid or seed from which life was created. Among the 4 principal great cosmogonic trees of India, the tree called Gambu takes a prominent place. The other 3 were the Ganta, the Kadamba, and the Ambala. These 4 colossal trees, along with 4 colossal elephants, represented the 4 cardinal points and were believed to support and uphold the world. The Gaambu, it is stated, grew on the south side of Mount Meru, the summit of which mountain was thought to represent the zenith. In the cosmogonic forest of the Himalaya, the enormous bulk of this tree towers to a stupendous height, and in itself represents the entire universe. 4 great rivers, of which the waters are inexhaustible, take their rise at the foot of the tree and flow in different directions. The tree bears a golden and immortal fruit as large as an elephant and resembling in its proportions the vase called Mahakala. The demons, under the form of wolves, continually long for the fruit, the Sanskrit name for the jackal being Gambuka. The seeds of these fruits produce grains of gold, which are carried down to the sea and are sometimes found on the seashore. It is said that this gold is of incalculable value, there being none to equal it in the whole world. It is also said that the juice flowing from the fruit gives rise to one of the above-mentioned rivers, called the Gambu, the waters of which, being gifted with salutary properties, are much sought after. The present representative on earth of this mythical tree is the Eugenia jambolana, of which the fruit is very large. The Septakataka of Hala says that lovers often hide among the foliage of this tree, and tells how the young wife experienced the pangs of jealousy when she beheld her husband appear with his ears adorned with leaves of the gambu. Another great cosmogonic tree of the Indian paradise was the mandara, while a tree called Manaratha Dayaka grew in the garden of the Vidyaharas, which had the power of fulfilling all desires, and particularly the desire of obtaining children. Very similar in its attributes to the world tree of Buddha, it also was a cloud tree, the tree of ambrosia, the tree of wisdom, the tree of the wise, the tree of perfection, and of holiness. The tree of Buddha was believed to have been a pipala or akvata, though some consider it to have been a palm, and many famous trees were conjectured to be either the identical tree or a descendant or cutting from it. The mythological conception of this tree as a cosmogonic tree is a tree glowing and shining with divine-like, jewel-like flowers, the whole tree being formed of gems of the rarest and richest description. The Buddhists relate that at the hour when Buddha was born, a flash of light passed through all the world, and an enormous branch of the Akvata grew up in the center of the universe. The legend of Buddha is often found in the tales narrated by various Buddhist pilgrims of China. We are told that the only place indicated by the gods where one could acquire complete wisdom was under the tree Pieto, P-E-I-T-O. This is the Chinese translation of the Hindu word for leaf, and the palm tree would appear to be indicated as it is evergreen. But Mr. Beale remarks that in all other respects it is said that the sacred tree in question is the papala, Ficus religiosa. The same tale narrates that the young Prince Buddha went along the road during the night, surrounded by the Devas, the Nagas, and other divine beings. Under the tree, Pieto, he walked from east to west, and for 7 days was adored by the gods. Then the gods built a golden palace to the northwest of the tree, in which Buddha slept for 7 days. He then returned to the lake Mukhalinda, where he sheltered in the shadow of the tree Medela. Thereafter the rain fell for 7 hours, and the Naga Mukhalinda came from the lake and sheltered Buddha with his hood. This tree was so identified with the existence of Buddha that any injury done to it affected himself. The legend proceeds to say that Buddha, at the commencement of his conversion, habitually retired under the tree Pieto to meditate and fast. His queen was annoyed and, in the hope of luring him back to the house, gave orders to have the Pieto cut down. At the thought of this sacrilege, Buddha's grief was so great that he fell fainting to the ground. He was sprinkled with water, and when, after much trouble, he was restored to consciousness, he threw 100 jugs of milk on the roots, and bending his face towards the ground, pronounced this vow: "If the tree does not revive, I shall never rise again." At that moment the tree grew branches, and little by little extended upwards until it attained the height of 120 feet. An amplification of the legend tells how Buddha sat for 6 years in absolute solitude under the tree, in utter abandonment to his sublime meditations. While there, the demoniacal hosts assailed him, surrounding the tree, invoking hurricanes and darkness, bringing deluges of rain, and hurling fiery darts at him. Buddha triumphantly repelled their attacks, and in the end the demons fled discomfited. Thus was Buddha enabled to retain possession of the tree with all its knowledge and wisdom, and as the heart-shaped leaves of the papala are ever in motion, even during the profoundest calm, they are believed to be still trembling as if in recognition of the mysterious meditations of Buddha. This is a continuation of mythical trees. Onward we go. The Kadamba tree, Nuclea kadamba, has also been recognized as the tree of Buddha. This tree bears orange-colored flowers, and it is said to have an irresistible power to bring absent lovers back. The Durga Sutra, a katana of Buddhist scriptures from the Chinese, says that a great king of trees called Kadamba grows on Mount Sum. M. Sonart, Essai sur la légende de Bouddha, says that the tree of Buddha sprang spontaneously from a nut from the Kadamba deposited on the ground. In a moment the earth cracked, a shoot appeared, and with inconceivable rapidity the colossal tree sprang up, its shadow covering a circumference of 300 cubits. Its fruit doubled the minds of the adversaries of Buddha, and the devas let loose all the furies of the tempest against it, but in vain. Another cosmogonic tree which grew in the Buddhist paradise was the manga ushaka, which of itself produced all the flowers of earth and water. It is sprinkled with the water of Anavatapta and is covered with precious stones. The Prachaka Buddhas recline in meditation in the grateful shade cast by this tree. In Kashmir, a second mythical tree called Elapatra is mentioned as having been killed by a Buddhist priest who became changed into a serpent in expiation of his sacrilege. Among other mythic trees may be mentioned the Geokarena, which is alluded to in the Zendavesta as having been created by Ahura Mazda, and it was the seat of immortality and ambrosia. One of the mythic trees of torture and growing in hell is the Salmali or Kalmali, Samalia malabarika. It is a tree with very large and strong thorns, from which it has the Sanskrit name of Hantakadruma, the tree of thorns, and on this account seems to have been placed in the infernal regions under the name of the tree of hell, or the tree of Yama, Yama being the Hindu god of death. Consequently, his abode is believed to be situated near this tree. The Mahabharata relates how Pitamaha, the great father creator, after having created the world, rested under the tree Kalmali, the leaves of which no wind came to stir. And in a Hindu poem, the tree is reproached for showing its red flowers from afar, and offering nothing to the wary traveler who hastens to it in the hope of finding refreshing fruit. Virgil, speaking of the vestibule of hell, says, "In the midst of a gloomy elm displays its boughs and aged arms, which seat vain dreams are commonly said to haunt, and under every leaf they dwell." From this, the elm has been called the tree of dreams, the tree of Wanieros, or the tree of Morpheus. It is related that the mythic garden of Bakavali, there grew trees of rubies with bunches of fruit so brilliant that they were equal to the clusters of stars, which grouped themselves around the tree of the sun. Another mythic celestial garden is mentioned in the tale of Anvari, Sohaila, which has been translated by Garson de Tassi. A gardener, they say, possessed a garden more pleasant and voluptuous than the most celebrated gardens of the Orient. Its trees of different species were as beautiful as the variegated plumage of the peacock, and its flowers of 1,000 varieties had the splendor of the crown of Chaos, king of Persia of the second dynasty. The surface of the soil was brilliant like the cheek of an elegantly clothed beauty, and the breezes of the atmosphere were perfumed like the store of an aromatic merchant. The branches, laden with fruit, were bowed down like an old man overwhelmed with years, and the fruits, sweet and perfumed, were preserved without the heat of fire. Two fabulous trees, which were said to grow on some part of the frontiers of India to the east of Persia, were called the trees of the sun and of the moon. Sir John Mandeville says that in the deserts, wherein the trees of the sun and of the moon, that spaken to King Alessandra and warned him of his death, and men saying that the folk that kept in the trees and aten of the fruit and of the balm that groweth there, liven well 400 zare or 500 zare, but be virtue of the fruit and of the balm, for men saying that balm groweth there in great plenty, and nowhere else, save only at Babylon. And I have told Zoo before. I'm going to show that because it is written in Old English, and it is a little difficult to say if you're not aware of what you're about to start reading. The Persian legend of these trees is to the effect that in his progress toward India, Alexander came to a famous plane tree which grew near Damghan, standing alone and solitary on a vast and arid tableland. This tree had a double trunk, one trunk being male and the other female. The former spoke during the day and the latter during the night. Alexander, taking counsel with these mystic plane trees, was warned in a boding voice that he would die while yet in his prime, and that others would reap the fruits of his victories. The legendary history of Alexander the Great, describing his campaigns for the conquest of the world, refers to these trees of the sun and of the moon. In the French prose romance of Alexander, AD 1180, it is related how Alexander and his chief companions ascended a certain mountain by 2,500 steps, which were attached to a golden chain. At the summit they found the golden temple of the sun, with an old man sleeping therein. The romance continues. When the old man saw them, he asked them if they wished to see the sacred trees of the moon and sun, which tell us of future events. When Alexander heard this, he was filled with great joy. They answered the old man, "Yes, to be sure, we wish to see them," and said to Alexander, "If you are born of parents both royal, you may enter this place." And Alexander replied, "We are born of parents both royal." Then the old man rose up from the bed whereon he was lying, and said to them, "Take off your mantles and shoes." And Tholomyès and Antigonus and Perdiccas followed him. Then they began to go through the forest, which enshrouded many marvels. There they found trees like unto laurels and olives, and they were 100 feet high, and there emanated from them much incense called Yapo balm. Afterwards they entered deeper into the forest and found a very tall tree which had neither leaf nor fruit. Perched on this tree was a large bird, having on its head a crest like the peacock's, and the feathers of its neck shining like pure gold. It was rose-colored. Then the man said to him, "This bird which astonishes you is called Phenis. It has no peer in all the world." Then they passed on and went to the trees of the sun and of the moon. When they had reached them, the old man said to them, "Look up above and think in your hearts what you wish to ask, and do not speak it aloud." Alexander asked him in what language the trees replied to people. And he replied, "The tree of the sun begins to speak Indian." Then Alexander kissed the trees and began to think in his heart whether he would conquer the whole world, and returned to Macedonia with all his army. Then the tree of the sun replied, "Alexander, you will be king of the whole world, but Macedonia you will never see." This prediction was fulfilled, as Alexander died at Babylon in 323 BC. These were interesting examples of speaking trees, and Marco Polo has described the tree of the sun, or Arbor Sol, but he appears to have confused it with another fabulous tree called the dry tree, or Arbor Sec. He says, "You arrive at a province which is called Tonocane. It also contains an immense plain on which is found the Arbor Sol, which we Christians call the Arbor Sec. And I will tell you what it is like. It is a tall and thick tree, having the bark on one side green and the other white, and it produces a rough husk like that of a chestnut, but without anything in it. The wood is yellow like box, and very strong, and there are no other trees near it or within 100 miles of it, except on one side, where you find trees within about 10 miles distance. And there the people of the country tell you was fought the battle between Alexander and King Darius." Alexander, in his letters to Dindymus, relating his travels, gave an account of some wonderful trees which grew only in the daytime, when they were guarded by fierce birds that spat deadly fire and appeared at night. Here we are. We are actually in my bedroom right now, and this is a beautiful umbrella tree, some devil's ivy, a little fire candlelight, and some Nag Champa incense. I'm having a pineapple flavored water. And here we go, continuing on at page 205 of Worship Trees. And let's see. Alexander, in his letters to Dindymus, relating his travels, gave an account of some wonderful trees which grew only in the daytime, when they were guarded by fierce birds that spat deadly fire and disappeared at night. The dry tree, withered tree, or arbor sec, has likewise been the subject of many fabulous legends which were much in vogue during the 13th century. It has been considered probable that the legend of the dry tree originated in the words of the prophet Ezekiel. And all the trees of the field shall know that I, the Lord, have brought down the high tree, have exalted the low tree, have dried up the green tree, and have made the dry tree to flourish. I, the Lord, have spoken and have done it. Sir John Mandeville mentions the dry tree thus: and a Lytil fro Ebron, Hebron, is the mount of Mamra, of the which the valley taketh the name. And there is a tree of oak that the Saracens call Dirpe, Dirpe, that is of Abraham's time, the which men clepen the dry tree, and they say that it hath been there sith the beginnage of the world, and was sometime green and bare leaves unto the time that our Lord died on the cross. And so died in all the trees that warn than in the world. And some say be here prophecies that a lord, a prince of the west side of the world, shall win the land of Promision, that is the Holy Land, with help of Christian, I guess that is, and he shall do singe a mass under that dry tree, and then the tree shall waxen green, and bear both fruit and leaves, and through that miracle many Saracens and Jews shall be turned to Christian faith. And therefore they done great worship thereto, and kepen it fully besley, and albeit so that it be dry, nethels yet he beareth great virtue. For certainly he that hath a little thereof upon him, it telleth him of the phalange Evel, and his whores shall not be affoundred, and many other virtues it hath, wherefore men hold in it full precious. I'm going to show you these words because, again, it is in Old English. There we go. Jacob Grimm gives several legends connected with a withered tree. He narrates how tradition says that the Emperor Frederick Barbarossa rests inside the Mount of Kefauser in Thuringia. He sits at a round table of stone with his head resting on his hand, nodding and blinking his eyes. His beard has grown round the table twice, and when it has done so a third time, he will awake. When he emerges from the mount, he will hang his shield on a withered tree standing nearby. The tree will then break into leaf, and a time of prosperity will dawn. Grimm also tells that in the Walser Feld is a withered tree which has been cut down 3 times, but has always sprung up again as luxuriant as ever. The next time it bursts into leaf, the terrible fight will begin, and when it bears fruit, Barbarossa will hang his shield on it. All men shall rally round the shield, and the wicked shall be extirpated. Another legend is quoted by Grimm, who relates that in the manuscript called Historia Trium Regum, written by Jo von Hildesheim in the 14th century, a temple of the Tartars is mentioned. Within this temple stands a withered tree closely guarded by men-at-arms. The legend says that whatever prince succeeds in hanging his shield on this tree will become lord of all the East. It is alleged that the great Khan did succeed in doing so, and in consequence became irresistible. The world tree of the Iranians or Persians was considered to have been the Hayoma tree, which bears the homa, an immortalizing and life-giving juice, similar to the soma or amrita of the Hindus. Windishman, writing on the Zendavesta, says, Homa is the first of the trees planted by Ahura Mazda in the fountain of life. He who drinks of its juice never dies. According to the Bundahesh, the Gogard or Geocorena tree bears the homa, which gives health and generative power and imparts life at the resurrection. The homa plant does not decay, bears no fruit, resembles the vine, is knotty, and has leaves like jessamine, yellow and white. In another part, he says, from this it appears that the white homa, or the tree Gokard, is the tree of life which grew in paradise. The Zendavesta, however, speaks of 2 trees, the homa and another one growing near it, which is called the impassive or inviolable. The latter bears fruits containing the seeds of every kind of plant. The fountain of life in which these trees grow is called Vorukasha. A lizard under the directions of Ahriman, the Persian Satan, is ever seeking an opportunity to destroy the sacred homa, but is thwarted in its efforts by 10 fish who ceaselessly swim around the trees, protecting them from evil. The ancient Chaldeans and Assyrians likewise had their world tree, Koaval, with Asir, the great first source, which tree was located in the forest of Eridhu. A fragment of a tablet containing a most ancient hymn, part of the Izdubar epic, begins by saying that in Eridhu a stalk grew, its root of white crystal which stretched towards the deep. Its seat was the center of the earth, while in its foliage was the home of Zikum, the heavens, the great primeval mother. One line in the fragment reads, into the heart of its holy house, which spread its shade like a forest, hath no man entered. This tree would appear to have been a pine tree, or perhaps more correctly, a cedar tree, and Professor A.H. Sayce mentions that the stock is indicated in the magical text in which the fragment about it has been appended. In this, he says, E.A. describes to Merodach the means whereby he is to cure a man who is possessed of the 7 evil spirits. He tells him first to go to the cedar tree, the tree that shatters the power of the incubus, upon whose core the name of Ea is recorded. Ea is spelt E-A. And then, with the help of a good masal, that is, a kind of phylactery, which is placed on the sick man's head at night to invoke the aid of the fire god to expel the demons. Professor Sayce adds that the mystic virtues of the cedar were remembered long after the hymns of Eridhu were written, and mentions a tablet describing the initiation of an augur. Part of the initiation consisted in the novice being made to descend into an artificial imitation of the lower world, where he beheld the altars amid the waters, the treasures of Anu, Bel, and Ea, the tablets of the gods, the delivering of the oracle of heaven and earth, and the cedar tree, the beloved of the great gods, which their hand had caused to grow. This world tree was looked upon as the personification of life and generation, and as such it was continually reproduced on the Assyrian sculptures and tablets. Several of these tablets appear to deal with the creation of man, and a very ancient one would seem to refer to the fall of man as recorded in the myth of creation in Genesis. In it, a tree similar to the tree of life, which grew in the center of the Garden of Eden, resembling a pine, bears a fruit hanging down on either side. Seated on each side of the tree is a man and a woman who are stretching out their hands to pluck the fruit. To complete the resemblance to the biblical account, a serpent is reared erect behind the woman. Many other sculptures show animals, often bulls, kneeling in adoration in front of the tree, or winged and eagle-headed cherubs in attendance upon it. It is curious to note the prevalence of the sacred number 7 as the number of its branches, 4 being on one side of the stem and 3 on the other side. The tree Gokard has been mentioned above, and it, under the name Garkad, is said to have been the tree of the Jews. A Mohammedan prophecy says that among the signs of the approach of the resurrection day will be war with the Jews, of whom the Mohammedans are to make a great slaughter. The very trees and stones betraying those who hide themselves among them, except only the tree called Garkad. This tree was an instance of a speaking tree, and it is said that in a dream, Muslim bi Uqba heard its voice appointing him to command the army of Yazid against Medina. The Quran mentions Muhammad's visit to heaven, whither he was taken, he said, by the angel Gabriel, and where he saw the lot tree beyond which there is no passing. This tree stands in the 7th heaven on the right hand of the throne of God and is the utmost bounds beyond which the angels themselves may not pass. A very thorny tree of Arabia is called the zakum tree, of which the fruit is extremely bitter. And these two evil qualities seem to have induced Muhammad to make it the principal tree in hell. As the Quran says, how different is the tree al-Zukum from the abode of Eden. We have planted it for the torment of the wicked. And again, it is a tree which issueth from the bottom of hell. The fruits thereof resembleth the heads of devils, and the damned shall eat of the same, and shall fill their bellies therewith. Verily the fruit of the tree al-Zakum shall be the food of the impious. Plato describes a thorny shrub, Calicotum villosa, much resembling our gorse, as one of the instruments of torture for tyrants in hell or Tartarus. In the paradise of Muhammad, situated in the 7th heaven, the trunks of all the trees are of pure gold, and the branches are laden with gems and delicious fruits of a size and taste unknown to earth. The most remarkable of these trees is the tree called Tuba, or Tuba, the tree of happiness, which stands in the place of Muhammad. It is of such a vast size that a person mounted on the swiftest horse would not be able to gallop from one side of its shadow to the other in 100 years. A branch of it reaches to the house of every true believer, so that if a man desires to eat of any particular fruit, it will be immediately presented to him by the boughs of the tree spontaneously bending down to his hand. And not only so, but it will supply the blessed with silken garments, and animals ready saddled and bridled to ride upon, which will issue forth from the fruits. The river of paradise will take their rise from the root of this tree, resembling the rivers issuing from Yggdrasil and the Hindu world tree Gaambu. The Byzantine world tree was composed of iron, which at the beginning spread throughout all space. The omnipotence of God formed its root, and on its summit were born heaven, earth, and hell. Christianity itself is partly founded on a tree, the wood of which furnished the cross. Many speculations have been put forth as to the identity of this tree, and several trees have been named. Thus it was said that the cross was made from the mistletoe, which at one time had been a fine forest tree, but has since then been degraded to the lowly position of a parasite. The aspen has also been named, and tradition says that when it realized for what purpose it was being used, its leaves commenced quivering with horror and continue doing so to this day. The fig tree, the oak, the elder, and the ash have also been credited with furnishing the wood. The book of Genesis tells us that God planted a garden eastward in Eden, where he made to grow every tree that is pleasant to the sight and good for food, the tree of life also in the midst of the garden, and the tree of knowledge of good and evil. Philon the Jew, in his book on the creation of the world, wrote, "They say it is written that during the time when man was alone and before woman was created, God planted a beautiful garden, not resembling ours in anything. But the trees which were planted in the terrestrial paradise of God had a soul and were rational, bearing as fruit virtues, immortal understanding, and vivacity of spirit, by which honesty and dishonesty, healthy life, immortality, and all similar things are distinguished and known." It was by means of the fruit of the tree of knowledge that the fall of man was brought about, and the tree of life was to be the means of redemption. This latter tree has been called the tree of Adam, or the tree of the cross. As was natural to the mind of primitive man, many legends sprang up around these trees, all of which bore upon the evolution of the Christian religion. What is more probable than that early man in his strivings after a divinity should imagine the erring pair, after having partaken of the forbidden fruit from the tree of knowledge, to have taken shelter under the colossal tree of life, growing in the center of the garden? Here, granted the tree to have been a fig tree or banyan, they would imagine themselves to be securely hidden among the luxuriant foliage from the eye of their angry God, and conscious of their nakedness, would be constrained to make themselves aprons of the large and broad leaves of the tree. One of the legends referred to narrates that Eve, in absence of mind, carried away with her from Eden a branch of the tree of knowledge, which she planted, while another tells that the archangel Michael handed to Eve a branch bearing 3 leaves, detached from that tree with instructions to plant it on the grave of Adam. She did so, and it grew into a tree, which was replanted as an ornamental tree by King Solomon in the temple, afterwards being plunged into the pool of Bethesda, where it remained until it was drawn forth to form the cross. Many variations of the legends surrounding the tree of the cross or the tree of Adam exist, and the rabbinical tradition of that tree was adopted by the Mohammedans, the account in the Quran differing but little from the Bible story. Among the tribes of Siberia, the legend tells that at the commencement of the world, a tree was born without branches. God caused 9 branches to spring, at the feet of which were born 9 men, the predestined ancestors of the 9 human races. God permitted men and animals to nourish themselves with the fruits of the 5 branches turned toward the east, forbidding them to taste the fruit of the western branches. As he appointed a dog and a serpent to guard these branches against men and against the seducing demon Erlik, while the serpent slept, Erlik climbed the tree and seduced Edje, the wife of Torangwa, who, having eaten of the protected fruit, gave part to her husband. The 2 were instantly covered with hair, and becoming ashamed of their nakedness, they themselves hid themselves under the trees. A Tale of Little Russia gives some further particulars regarding the Tree of the Cross. It is said that the Virgin, when walking with Jesus one day, happened to stumble when passing near the tree, and sorrowfully remarked that on this thrice blessed tree her son would be crucified. Jesus in reply said, "It is true, my mother." The legend adds that the Jews tried to crucify Christ on certain other trees at first, but failed to do so until at last they found the thrice blessed tree. In various countries of the world, many other mythical trees were alleged to have grown, but these seem to have had their existence only in the excited imaginations of various early travelers who were only too prone to put faith in all the marvelous tales they were told. Certain mythical trees are mentioned in Russian folklore, such as the vast oak which grows on the island of Bujan, among the branches of which the sun disappears for repose every evening, to rise again therefrom refreshed in the morning. Another tale tells of an old man who once climbed an oak of which the top reached the sky, and where a hind lived which could not be burned by fire nor drowned in water. Yet a third myth represents the thundercloud as a gigantic, rainy, and sonorous tree, which, while singing, that is, thundering, distills the water of life. The tales regarding this singing tree tell how the hero who wishes to reach it must whistle on a magic pipe or flute as to imitate the sound of the tempest. Colonel Kenneth Mackay gives a charming conception of the belief in a future state held by the natives of Papua. He says that he was told that far up in the Astrolabe range of mountains there blooms invisible to mortal eye a great and gracious tree, in and around which dwell forever, free from care and happy, all those who have lived good lives ere death claimed them. There, lovers and loved relations will be reunited, while those already dwellers beneath its shade may and do come back to watch over the living, so that each soul yet on earth has an unseen but ever-present loving guide and helper. The wicked have to pass through sickness, pain, and trouble before they reach the tree, but eventually they too are gathered beneath its branches. The natives of the Astrolabe district say they know this sacred Adele is true because those they loved and have lost have come back to them and told them so. Among the Maoris of New Zealand, the great father of forests and of trees are known as Tain Mahuta, and the mythological conception of him was that of a colossal tree. Originally, according to the Maori mythology, heaven and earth were one, united in a close embrace, heaven lying on the top of earth. As a consequence, their children, the gods, were forced to dwell in perpetual darkness until they could endure it no longer and resolved to obtain freedom. One of these gods was the forest god, Tain Mahuta, who remarked to his brethren, "It is better to rend them apart, and to let the heavens stand far above us, and the earth lie under our feet. Let the sky become as a stranger to us, but the earth remain close to us as our nursing mother." To him, accordingly, was deputed the task of separating heaven from earth. He uprose in his might, planted his head in the earth, and with his feet gradually forced the sky far upwards, where it has remained ever since. This colossal tree may be imagined as growing at a rapid rate, with its widespread branches gradually pushing upward the atmosphere with its clouds, in the same manner as the rapid growth of broad-headed fungi has been known to raise flagstones several inches. One of Tain Mahuta's brethren, who had never consented to the separation of his parents, was Tawiri Mati, the father of winds and storms. He followed his father into the sky, and since then, in revenge, has never ceased to make war on the forest trees, the children of Tain Mahuta. This New Zealand myth alludes to the rainbow as a kind of monster and tells that in the warfare between the forest and the storm, the rainbow arose and, placing his mouth close to Tain Mahuta, the father of trees, blew so vigorously that the trunk was snapped in two and the broken branches strewed the ground. In the mythology of certain tribes of Mexico and Yucatan, a great cosmogonic tree has a prominent place. It forms the center of the universe, its branches rising to the clouds, from which flows the fertilizing rain, while it is rooted in the vase of the primeval waters, from which all things originated. The Acahuiros of Bolivia also have a mighty world tree which bore not only all kinds of fruit, but also all organic beings. The natives of Hawaii have mythical cow trees, spelt Kou, under the shade of which in the lower regions the dead recline and feed on lizards and butterflies. Among the natives of the islands of the South Pacific Ocean, there is a belief in a certain point of departure for the spirit world. The name of this spirit world in different islands is Avaiki, Hawaii, or Hawaiiki, and on the island of Mangaia, the point of departure is a cliff overhanging the sea. As soon as the departing soul reaches the edge of the cliff, a gigantic boa tree, Basilaria laurifolia, springs up from Avaiki to receive the unhappy soul. The branches of this tree are covered with fragrant blossoms, and each tribe has a special branch reserved for it. The branch reserved for the soul's particular tribe is put forward nearest to him. By some miraculous force, he is compelled to climb this branch, unless, as is sometimes the case, a mysterious voice calls him back to life and health. As soon as he is on the branch, the bua tree descends to the lower world, bearing the soul with it. Beneath is a net spread to catch the souls as they fall off the branches, which net is held by the demon Akaanga and his assistants. After being half drowned in a great lake at the foot of the bua tree, the soul is taken into the presence of the hag Mirukura, or the Ruddy, so called from her face reflecting the flames of her hell oven in which she cooks the unhappy souls. In allusion to this myth, anyone who has recovered from a serious illness is often wont to remark, "Yes, I have set foot upon a branch of the bua tree, and yet have been sent back to life." The Samoans similarly believed that a coconut tree grew near the entrance to Pulotu, or the world of spirits, and this tree was called the tree of Leosia, or the Watcher. Should a spirit strike against it, it had to go back to the body for another term of earthly existence, and the relatives rejoiced at this return from the gates of death, saying, "He has come back from the tree of the Watcher." In England, at one time, there was a belief in what was called an imp tree, spelt YMP. Although it does not seem quite clear whether this was a mythical tree or an actual tree consecrated to the imps or fiends, as Sir Walter Scott suggests. It appears, however, to be generally accepted that the imp tree is simply a grafted tree, and the fact or process of grafting was considered to have imparted a peculiar character to the tree. As such, it figures in some of the early fairy romances. In the Isle of Man, there was a mythical tree known as the Blue Tree of Glen Alden. The legend relates how a Manx fairy, who once expelled from the fairy court because he had been engaged in courting a pretty Manx maiden in a bower under the Blue Tree of Glen Alden, and in consequence had been absent from the festival of the harvest moon, during which period he had been dancing in the merry glen of Rushen. His fate was to remain in a wild form, covered with hair, hence his name Finaderi, meaning the hairy one, in the Isle of Man till doomsday. A mystic rowan tree was believed to grow in one of the Orkney Islands, which with which their fate was bound up. It was said that should even a loaf of this tree be carried away with the island, the whole group would pass under the dominion of a foreign land. And we are on page 216. I'm just going to show you a couple of things. This is my devil's ivy umbrella tree, as I may have said. Some Nag Champa incense, a little candle, and just going to show a few of my favorite images I have here on the wall at the moment. The cat lover, this copy of a beautiful painting. And these are just some different leaves. This is Hootie. This is a paint by number. And a little bit of pan. Just some paintings. Some colorings, some trees. Some lavender. I love forests. Yeah. And this is from a painting called The Grove. Pan here again. Some more Hootie. Some more plants. I'm caught on the umbrella tree. And these plants light up. Oof, I am walking on my bed, and some of the sounds you may have heard were my bed springs popping. Yeah, so I will be making more videos in a moment. I kind of changed this painting a little bit from what it was supposed to be. I gave her cute little fangs and a few other things. And yeah, I'm filming from my bedroom today a little bit. All right. Love you.